Hi. Sound is going to be fun. Oh, wait a minute. Let me go to my preferences. Technology. I told him you have a big Greek family coming, so we have to make this quick. Oh, I kind of heard it. Yeah, it's very low, like not usable low. Hmm. I almost wonder if it's going to be better to do this.
Almost impossible to upload the motion capture with Drive.
Say it again?
It was almost impossible to upload the mocap.
Yeah. That's okay. We'll use it.
It's
I
still like
apologize. Ooh. Okay, we can see you and we can kind of hear you because when I plugged in the sound, it was so low we couldn't hear you. So it's coming through my laptop. So
okay.
feel free to yell and bring in your family. Chandler. Okay, I don't know what you can see.
Okay.
I think you can see yourself back here. On the big
Yes, and I
screen.
can see there is a slight delay,
Yeah, there is a slight delay.
but that's okay with me. I'm used to playing computer games, so lagging is okay.
Okay, can you guys hear her? Kind of. Okay, this is.
Once we get the door closed.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and close it.
Which we should because we've started.
Okay, I'm going to let Anna go first because, well, you've got the first part of it also, but she's also in Athens. Are you in Athens? Yeah, she's in
Yep.
Athens, and she's got a very large Greek family coming over in about 10 minutes now, I guess. So, do you want to start? Well, we're talking today about gender and sexuality in VR and kind of what's happening, where we are historically and kind of future trajectories. That's a hard word. So Anna's going to give us as a Greek scholar or antiquity scholar or what I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Everything. Cafeteria academic is, I think, the right term right now.
So go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us what you want to tell us.
All right. It's quite interesting because I can see myself, and I come to you a little bit laggy, as we say, gamers language. Hello.
There's
Hello.
Chandler.
So, so it's quite important because I'm a gamer and I'm also a scholar of information technology and the humanities, and I normally work at Umeå University in Sweden. So one of the interesting things that we have observed over the years is that our understanding of gender in the virtual world has changed. And now with virtual reality is even more complicated. The first thing that is quite interesting is that just like the internet, VR is driven by the adult industry basically. So there's a lot of objectification that has to do with how the bodies are represented within space. And within a virtual space precisely because it is there and it isn't. So it's not in the real world, but it's very realistic. One of the things that sort of attracted my attention was when I was invited at some friend's place to play PlayStation VR. And once this rally game started, the first thing that appears in front of you is the female, a naked torso of a woman. That it looks like a little bit like a robot. So a mix between a human and some robotic entity, some cyborg. And I thought, oh wow, this is really interesting. I mean, PlayStation is developed by a Japanese company, obviously. It's a Sony product. Um, when we used to play esports back in the day and we played games like Tekken or Street Fighter, we always thought, okay, but why are the female characters so weak? Then later, when we started playing games developed in the United States or between the United States and Europe, such as like World of Warcraft, female characters, they made a statement that female characters and female bodies in the world are as strong as masculine characters. So that was quite interesting. To see that PlayStation hasn't moved forward and they still consider women in terms of embodiment as this over sexualized body. Um, so although VR is at the moment like the internet, as I said, driven by the porn industry, on the other side there's a dichotomy and a paradox, which is the fact that there's so many social media groups for which I think Dr. Dean will talk to you more about in a minute. There's so many VR groups that basically primarily concentrate themselves on um, looking at how women are represented online, and then within research infrastructures, within universities and higher education, you have a completely different setup where people are actually exploring the dimensions of empathy. So, for example, in the virtual human interaction lab at Stanford, one of the very interesting things they do is that you can log into the world, wear your head mount, and even if you are a middle-aged white man, you can appear as a black woman or as a Latino woman or as an Asian woman, and then you get harassed by some other avatar. So, of course, this is experimental, and it doesn't necessarily mean that people will feel empathy, but it sort of raises awareness. Now, I will try to do something really analog and show you the mocap that I've been trying to upload for Steph for hours now. 3 hours. I even got into a fight with my big fat Greek family for that. Okay, so one of the interesting things, let me just show you, is that we, as scholars of the classical world, we were thinking about making a mocap of a genre of performance in the ancient world called Roman pantomime. So the issues we had with Roman pantomime is that it's a genre for which we know nothing about. It's a form of a theater performance, and the bodies that the way that the dancers view their bodies back in like pre-Christian times is that they were very, very young, they were teenagers, and you could never sort of classify them in terms of gender. I mean, the adjectives they use are interchangeably male or female. So we didn't really know exactly how to do that. So we picked a very provisional avatar. Whoops, this is still work in progress, guys, so I'm going to have to not stream it, but show you my actual computer screen. Can you see it? So we created a VR environment for education to just necessarily speak about these issues. And one of the things is, other than creating a beautiful ancient theater on VR, which now you see in 2D, is having an actual dancer that is neither male or female, nor grown up, nor young, so to say, nor a teenager. And we used the face of a woman and the body of a man. Now, these people were shrouded, so you couldn't really see what the body parts were. So we made it quite ambiguous in that way. And we're still working on it, so any recommendations, welcome. But that is just one of the issues that we have when we reconstruct archaeological environments or environments that have to do with sort of remote cultures. And I know that there's another initiative of somebody that is working with Bronze Age Greece, and the first thing that you see when you log in is apparently this bare-breasted princess, which is really, of course, enticing, should be the right word, but it's also quite interesting to look at, because you can't just show people naked women and pretend they understand. In other cultures, nudity could be a sense of empowerment, or it could also be something that would denote slavery. And if an archaeologist is not certain about that, we can't really portray it as such. So these were these were the things I was meant to tell you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I have another 5 minutes before my daughter and all the cousins storm in.
Do you have questions?
What does she think exactly about specific games that are like trying to create a character to where it's not really certain about either?
So kind of an androgynous character?
Yeah.
Did you hear the question?
Yeah, of course I did. I'm not sure there is something. I mean, the only sort of widely commercially available and rather less expensive platform I've used already as a gamer, not as a scholar that is trying to work with VR in the sense of prototyping, has been PlayStation 2. PlayStation on VR. And the only game where I actually saw a female character was one that was not a playable character. It's just as the game loads and as you calibrate into the rally game for PlayStation, you just see this body that is very openly female. It's a little bit like the movie Ex Machina. You see the body, you see that the body parts are mechanic, but it's still a centralized, perfect female. That is, of course, naked. And although it's not it's weird with cyborgs, because on the one hand they're machines, but on the other hand, they're not an unattractive machine. So the boundaries between what's real and what's virtual and what's gendered and what not are very complicated. And I think we still need time to see more developed things to organize that. A company in the UK recently asked my opinion. They're called Milk Kitty, and they are developing a new sport called Hyperbrawl, for example. And they told me that. I was like, okay, so Hyperbrawl is about fighters, and it's an esport where you can play 1-to-1 in an arena environment with a metal ball, or or 2 versus 2, and most of their characters were mythical people, or big Irish heroes, or they're still developing it. And I said, okay, where's the women? Like, do you have any female characters? And the esports team I normally talk to in Sweden, the female sports team, they always ask, well, we can't really identify with the characters because they're not female enough, or when they're female, they're objectified. I would say that there's a fantastic book you should read about it, because that's a big discussion, and I don't think I have an answer, I'm afraid. But there's a book called Beyond Barbie to Mortal Kombat that precisely deals with these questions. So back in the day, in the 90s, people, and especially companies, were developing games for women, which was a mistake, because then you enhance more sort of the differences between genders. But nowadays, that's not the case. People are just developing games. It's just that from empirical research, if you ask esports teams, so female teams, so why do you think there's 4 of you and there's 30 guys competing on a national scale? And they say it's because we're not encouraged. So it's not a part of the general culture. So I think androgynous characters are great. There's also the example of Misha Cardenas. If you can Google it, I mean, Dr. Dean can tell you more about it. We were discussing it a few days ago, Steph. A person that transitioned, and she transitioned to a woman, a transgender female, who actually created a game called Becoming Dragon, where she, in real time, on very, very primary VR, is transforming herself into a dragon, so that there's not any gender, but it's about the transformation into what you feel like you want to be. Yeah, that's it. If that's an answer, even, I'm not sure.
Have you seen Imagine Dragon?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you too, and I'm sorry it's been all messy with uploading files and trying to get to talk to you guys.
We've been trying to upload files all morning. Our streaming just went.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and good luck with the rest of the day.
Yes.
And let's keep in touch about the work, okay?
Ja, såg du vad jag skrev tidigare?
Ja, precis.
Ja. Hälsa Viktor. Hej då.
Precis, vi pratas snart. Hej då.
Ja, bra. Hej då. Okay, I don't know why this keeps falling, but it does. It's great. There we go. Maybe stay. I know. Yeah. Okay, that was decent. Except it wasn't Facebook's fault that the sound was bad. Okay, so let me see. How much time do I have left?
11:35.
Oh, cool beans. Okay, so what Anna was talking about, for the most part, and I don't know if you kind of caught the I have a love-hate with Prezi. Collaborative working across the world, it can be fun sometimes. Our title is called Holding Up Half of the Virtual Sky, because we're talking about women's representations in VR and how that really matters, and how previously in tech, women haven't been as well represented, and there's been an interesting kind of user experience that really solidifies that or shows that right now, about women and motion sickness in VR. I don't know if you've seen kind of preliminary reports that are coming out right now that there's about a 70% rate of women getting motion sick in VR, and there's about a 24% rate of men getting sick in VR. And they didn't know this in the beginning. And there's a hypothesis that the women just weren't there to user test. Like, it's so prominently men in these tech companies that they just missed that group, and it's become a real interesting issue. So they're trying to figure out if it's a biological thing, like what actually is going on. But that just kind of underscores this lack of women in tech still, even though we've got these STEM initiatives and or STEAM now initiatives. But women that are in VR right now are really excited about this possibility of this is a new space. It's a new way to tell stories, and what can we do to get in this kind of in the ground floor and start helping develop this. So representation matters. Why does representation matter? Chandler should know. He's been in my classes. He's like, don't do it to me.
No, it's a whole lecture.
It's a whole series.
Representation matters because you would think by this point in media that it would be a cultural norm for representation.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially what actually kind of broke my heart when she was just talking is, I know it's been a thing since Mortal Kombat to have the scantily clad woman or the naked woman as a character, and you would think with all of these initiatives like you're talking about and all of these studies that by now, as VR is coming out, that we would be more aware of this, and it's just not necessarily the case.
Right. There's a little quote that says you can't be what you can't see. And you can. I mean, you can eventually, possibly, but it's harder, right? There's a threshold there if you can't see what you're going to be. So how women are represented and how people of color are represented in VR has really been kind of a white man's world at the moment. So how can this be changed, and what's going on right now? So where are we right now? That's not where we are. Love, hate with Prezi. Okay, so I was Googling, or I was YouTubing, I was searching, using Google as a verb, women in VR. So I should get all kinds of like games and stuff, right? Sort of. Did you know that they let porn on YouTube still? I did not realize this. That was the main hits, as you can see. Porn, of course, or the porn industry drives technology. It always has. It's driven VHS. It's a driving force. There's a lot of money in it. It drives technology. VR is the same way. Right now, a lot of kind of multi-cam, interactive experiences are happening not only on YouTube, but other places as well, where the porn industry is kind of taking off with VR too. So that was a main category. And if you can see, there's two panels here, and there were like 12 pages of hits. There's two panels here. The main ones that come up at first, well, first we've got porn, but then you get a lot of these crazy women watching a roller coaster, or roller coaster ride makes woman go nuts. So it's a lot of this belittling reactions. Has anyone in here ever tried VR, like actually gotten in the immersive experience? What was your first reaction?
This is crazy.
Oh my God! Like
it's weird.
Yeah.
Like they're converting concerts and stuff now too.
Like, exactly. Yeah.
And that's so weird because they have the camera so close, and you're like, wow, I'm physically.
Yeah, and it almost feels like you can touch. And if you watch people in VR, it looks like they're trying to touch. Or has anyone ever been in that one where the floor drops out from under you and you're on like this little plank? You're like, oh crap, what am I going to do? So there's this immersive presence that is very strong in there. It's easily breakable too, but it's also very strong when you first initially get in. So these reactions of, oh my God, this is so cool, is being kind of reclassified as a female reaction. Oh my God, they went crazy. So that's kind of an interesting paradigm right there. Another, please ignore his commentary because it was the only, I've had previous instances of this game that I've been able to find, but I could only find this one at the moment. Kia is a really interesting kind of start in the right direction, where they're taking, it's a woman named Nina DePena, I think is how you pronounce her name, where she's taking, Nonia DePena, where she's taking audio first and creating experiences from that in VR. So this is a 911 call about a woman who was unfortunately murdered by her boyfriend in a case of domestic violence, and her sisters are trying to get her out of there. And this was shown at Sundance.
About a gun. There are babies in the house. They're okay?
Bridgestone tires.
We want to go get our sister out the house.
Someone made an effort to put that there.
You do not need to go into the house.
How long is the officer going to take?
Ma'am, they're coming as
Like, so
quickly as
there's be a
possible.
Happy Meal in the car or something.
Well, we getting the kids out the house. Why y'all can't talk about it? That's all y'all have to do is talk about it and just try to work things out here, at least for the baby. Everything, fast and all. So what are you saying?
So she starts from the audio, and then she continues on to create this experience. And it seems really interesting, right? But which audio you choose and which calls you choose also play a role, because right now this is the only one out there about domestic violence, or the only one that I know of. I've searched pretty hard. It's one of the only ones, at least, I'm willing to say. But it's also a very stereotypical example. it really kind of perpetuates stereotypes of what a domestic violence victim is. And that too, even though you're raising awareness, is problematic. Oops, am I gonna have to, how do I do this part? Do I have to go all the way to the end to make it go somewhere? I'm not gonna play the whole, because it actually, you hear the real 911 call of her being murdered. How do I get to the next? There we go.
A lot of the stories my mom told me shaped me who I am as a person.
There we go. So the question then becomes, what happens when women, people of color, disenfranchised, are allowed to narrate their own stories? Like, what happens when that power, when that threshold of creation becomes low enough that they can start narrating what it means to be whatever category they are? What kind of experiences do they create?
And I think also, in a way, the stories we tell in our movies shape the world and shape people who watch them.
That got together
Last year, we showed a glimpse of the Angelica because we had just kind of started to work with Wesley Alsbrook, who's the illustrator who painted everything you see in there. And we have her show the tool we created for her.
It was created just for me. I was user zero, and I used Quill to make every single aspect of Dear Angelica. I always thought Dear Angelica is a comic. Dear Angelica should be a comic. This is a tool for narrative. This is not just for like drawing, but this is something that anybody who wants to tell a story can use.
We wanted to make sure that Wesley's voice as an artist comes through, and I love non-photorealistic kind of animation. I was fascinated by the idea to do something illustrative in VR, like how would it feel like to step inside of an illustration, and then to tell a story through that. A new way.
Okay, so beyond representation, what do you think another kind of killer app for VR would be that would begin to kind of highlight different stories that you would normally get?
Well, this is putting you inside of art.
I'm sorry?
This is putting you inside of art.
Well, not only inside of art, but inside. Like, you are immersed into a situation. Right now, VR is really being called, and granted, every time you get a new technology, you get this like euphoria, excitement of, oh my God, it's going to save the world. And the opposite, but we won't go there. So one of the things that can happen, or the potential, or kind of a potential killer app of VR, is this ability to empathize. They're actually calling it an empathy machine. And we're just now starting research at MTSU where we're going to create negative experiences and positive experiences, social experiences, and measure the longevity of the stickiness. Does that create an empathetic response? What kind of empathetic response? And how long lasting will that be? Could it result in political change, or could it just kind of fall flat? I just dumped a bucket of ice over my head. Now what? It's like the stickiness factor of these kind of things. Right now, if you look at a lot of online activism, there isn't a sticky factor, right? You dump the ice bucket and then you go on with your life, or you push share and go on with your life. So if you look at other types of activism, like the civil rights movement, which was a really long acting movement, and there was a lot of different aspects, and there was a really good stickiness factor. How can we start bringing lessons that we've learned from long-term successful movements into VR to kind of do it at a quicker pace, still give the stickiness factor?
History, like history lessons and things like
Yes,
that.
these immersive experiences where you... Yeah, definitely. You get into some like ethical questions, like whose history and whose story, and so you have to get this kind of it's a sticky. I keep using the word sticky.
That's why
It's
it's to be more, right? To
Yeah.
your point of like, if it's still a little bit out of reach for most people, then only some fraction of it's going to be told. But if it's democratized and accessible, then
Exactly.
everyone's.
And it's not there yet because the cost of the equipment is still kind of high, and the learning curve is still kind of high. But I'm going to show you a tool that I just discovered that's going to bring that learning curve way, way down.
There's a great lecture later on the cost of that coming.
Would that be the next lecture?
I think that's at like 1:45.
At 1:45, a group of students are going to talk about like zero budget
Oh.
AR or VR, not AR. AR too? Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about VR, are we talking about computer-generated characters?
Not always, no. Like this is a 360 camera that's live streaming us right now. Nothing computer generated. Well, I'm going through a computer, but so both. both experiences through using film or cinematic techniques, but also computer-generated Maya type of stuff. And it's important to get both. So let me give you, how much time do I have left? 10 minutes. Go forward.
There's really no.
A lot of the
No.
Because it's.
That's why.
It's about
stories my mom.
who has the headset on, or am I observing, or am I participant? You know, there's no, and then it's the dearth of women anywhere in the tech industry that, you know, is driving so much of this.
Right. Exactly. So there are different things. I'm sorry. Yes, actually, there is a group going down to the Amazon this summer to start putting in. We had a group coming up here called the Kaipo, which is a tribe that lives sort of in the rainforest. They're working for a very deforestation, and they're going down there and talking about putting a 360 installation in communities. So it's happening, and NTSU is part of it, which is awesome. But, okay, so here you were asking about kind of computer generation. So she's using a Vive, and she's using sensors on her feet, her head, her waist, that's allowing her to create this character that would have been super difficult and quite learning her previously. There's another one that is about to come into my classes that I'm super excited about. I mean, I can speak for a second about this as well. There's a group, because I jumped ahead of myself. There's a group, it's international, but I think they're based in New York right now, that are doing some really interesting kind of disruptive landscapes. And they've created something that was also shown at Sundance called neurospeculative Afrofeminism. And it's supposed to be a love letter to Black women to create an experience that helps them live in a future that they get to actually help create. It's a relationship to embodiment. It's how to place the viewer in the Black woman's body in a respectful way, in a way that differs from the video game industry. Because, like Anna was saying earlier, there's not a lot of healthy representation of female bodies in the video game industry right now. What's so interesting about this one, and it's so exciting to follow this one, and I wish we had scientists here to help us do this, they're actually they're using MRI technology and I think other technology to show how it's going to actually cognitively change your brain. But if you keep going into these experiences and they keep provoking responses from you, it's not just that you've retrained or relearned to kind of have a different image of what you see, but you actually change the synaptic responses in your brain to begin to empathize more and take in other cultures and other images as the same as yours.
Which makes you think about,
or as
you
equal.
talked about VR porn earlier.
Uh-huh.
You go, is that going to be the junk food of VR? Is that going to be neuro, is it going to be shifting, synapses?
That is a Black Mirror episode.
Oh, it is.
Oh.
Yes. And then I haven't visited there in a while. Is this kind of thing used in like Second Life?
Second Life, how much is Second? I'm not sure. No. It's different from Second Life because of the immersion factor. So Second Life was a really great early kind of VR. I used to teach language in it. That and Active Worlds. I don't know if you remember Active Worlds from way back when too. It kind of was, it hung out with Second Life, but Second Life was more commercial and Active Worlds was more educational. But when you get these headsets on, you get immersed, and that provokes a much more visceral response than if you're looking at it mediated through a screen. So if it's mediated with full immersion, you get a very different response than if there's a screen and you still have the periphery. And you can see with the different technologies, that you also get different levels of immersion. So like the Google Cardboards, you still have your periphery, so you're not going to get as immersed. Where the Gear VR might be kind of where it's headed because the price point is quite low. It's like $90 for the headset, although you have to have that phone or the Samsung phone. It runs off the Oculus engine. It's more powerful than like the Google Cardboards. So that, and you get more immersion because you're actually blacked into this. And then you've got things like the Vive and the Oculus where you're totally immersed. It's got a very powerful computer running it, so you get a lot more capabilities and longer experiences and more gameplay because you're actually immersed in something with a powerful engine running it. But those are like $800 or $900. So those have got, or I think Oculus has gone down to what, 500 now. Still, it's yeah, exactly. You still have and technology is a lot. There, it's better, but it's not there yet. Like we haven't hit that critical mass yet. But it's better than it was. So it's going to be interesting. Is it going to totally flop, or is it going to take off? We're at this cusp. We don't know. Which I kind of call the, are we at the cutting edge or the bleeding edge? We don't quite know yet.
So in an environment like that, would the experiences be completely scripted?
Yeah, no. It was within boundaries. Do you remember Choose Your Own Adventure books?
Yes.
Within boundaries. So you can, and you'll have more options in a Choose Your Own Adventure book, but it's that same type of metaphor. Like you can choose different pathways to go, or like hypertext of the 90s. You can choose different pathways to go, but it's still within kind of a bounded world or a bounded experience.
So the character would be going through an experience, and you would be put into the point of view of that character.
Exactly. And I was listening to, I don't know if you know our Voices of VR, which is an amazing podcast. I was listening to that on the way up here, and just happened to hit this really great one that was like perfect for today's talk while driving. And he was talking about how your mind and your body work together. And if you look down and you're like, oh my gosh, I have boobs now. I'm a woman now. That would be a very different experience. But your mind will still go with it because you're used to performing something and seeing like the extension of your hand. You're used to seeing your body. So your brain, for the most part, still it'll follow you with it. It'll kind of come into that illusion willingly. So you can experience a different experience than you would in any other way, in any other kind of immersive environment, because of the immersion. So that present and that embodiment and the immersion makes all of the difference, and your brain will go with you. There's some interesting studies that should say if it's too realistic, your brain won't go with you because it's been trained to know, like, that's not really a spider, that's a computer-generated spider. So if it's too realistic, it won't follow you there, but if it's slightly realistic, then it will.
It's like a suspension of disbelief.
Yeah, a willing suspension of disbelief. This is the killer app
This is Storyboard VR by Artifact.
I haven't shown this to you, Todd, yet, but we have to get it. Like, we have to get it. There's no option.
In this tutorial, we'll create this happy little storyboard, inspired by the graphic novel series, Amulet.
You've seen this?
Well, I haven't seen this.
Alright, so this is the sphere template. I'm going to show you what it might look like to make a little underground or underwater submarine, where you have these portholes around. The idea is anything you sketch in here, you just take straight into Storyboard VR, and you can do this on paper or digitally. And if you draw things that are on this perspective grid like this, in Storyboard VR, they'll be straight. So if I wanted to draw like a little cube or something on the floor, I could do that. The tricky thing to keep in mind when you're sketching into this is what the field of view is. So we made this fun little preview here, so very fancy. You can see, like, oh, if I'm looking in here, I might be able to see about that much as I look around. And the idea here is maybe you have these, this is like looking out into the water, underwater, and this is like a tentacle that's kind of spanning all around your entire ship. And maybe there's another one over here. And my
So he's able to bring this into the program that he's got.
Actually, no, we'll make the front over here. So we'll move this guy over here. This window's a little bigger, that's right. And then I'll add my little mini sub here. This looks... So it's like the idea that there's another little sub out there, and this is the camera view from there. So I can kind of get a sense for me and as I get into
Storyboard. So that was
like... This works.
I think this is Adobe that he put it in.
Is in the Storyboard VR project
and then he cropped it, saved it as a picture.
When you first get Storyboard VR, you can just run
uploaded
the
it
exe.
Storyboard
It'll
VR,
make this projects folder and put a sample project in here.
And then he starts adding textures to it.
Pretty close.
This is something our students can do.
Yeah, about
this is something
2 meters away seems like a good size for Oh yeah, so that unsightly scene that I didn't pay attention
So
to.
if you
Let's
stop
just put it
thinking
behind
of
there so I
the
can't
game
see it.
as much and this
Alright, so
huge
now I've got
threshold
a
of
little bit of
entry and start
parallax
thinking
going.
experiences,
Pretty nice.
imagine middle
Let's
school
see
students coming
if
back and say,
this
what did you do for the
worked
summer?
out. So,
Show
oh
me your
yeah, so
experience.
there's
Show me
this
one
guy.
experience that you
We'll
created
put
this summer.
him way out in space. Wait, how far
So the
was he?
threshold of entry
29,
is much lower.
50 meters,
Not only
something
that,
like
but
that.
also for the cameras.
Alright,
This
so
camera
let's see
is
if this
about
works. So I'm
a
going to walk
$400
over here,
camera,
look
which
out
is
this
a much
window.
lower than the old
Whoa, I
like
can
GoPro
see
rigs
the
that are
underground
like
stuff.
5,000.
Oh, looks like I missed some pixels here.
Granted, you're going to
No
suffer
big
a bit
deal.
of quality, for sure,
But yeah, this
because
looks
this is
pretty
more like
sweet.
old
I
color
can look
cameras, if you
around.
remember those.
Let's
Yes.
add some more planes.
Yes.
So we had our here. The idea
We're
was
going to do it in
I put
club
my
next
head
year.
into this.
Oh, will it fall maybe?
Level complete. Kraken runs away with his tail between his legs. Oh no, goes down into the depths.
So what he's doing is just like storyboarding with anything else. He's taking the storyboard and then you put it all together and animate it. And you can do it through this program. It's the coolest thing. When I found it, I was like, we must have this. There's not an option here.
How much does that thing cost? Oh my goodness.
I need to look at this. I want to say it's not that high. No. I downloaded it. I think this program's free. That program. The Vive's not.
The camera, yeah.
Yeah, the camera's not. But if I'm not, I will have to double check. But I downloaded it last night, and I'm pretty sure because I didn't pay anything. So, but I haven't gone in and played with it yet. So where are we? If you think about women in technology, we are holding up half of the virtual sky. It's time that we kind of dive in and start representing what it actually means to be a woman in this world and these experiences, and not just kind of rely on what we're told it means to be. Are there any questions?
I have a point to make. You know, say it's not just video games, and you know, I think that's going to be the entry point for a lot of people. But you have like the Scorpio coming out, or whatever they're going to call it when it comes out, and you have PlayStation VR, and so these are low cost entry points to virtual reality. I think it's just hugely important to begin re-emphasizing the role of women in that area.
Definitely.
Because it's going to really be a bummer if at the foundation of VR for consumers that's not set, that bar is not set.
Exactly. And
actually, I don't mean to be rude, but you have a whole group waiting to start the next session.
Oh, okay. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
No, that's a very interesting point too, because there is this bottleneck. Right now there's a bottleneck that women are aware of, and they're saying this is the time to get in. So there is this awareness out there, I think, because we kind of missed the boat the first time. So it's exciting. It's an exciting time. Thank you so much. If you want to follow our kind of how the research is going to go, that's my blog name, Varcat.
I love it.
Yeah. And I'm going to start posting our research results here. It's going to take time. We're just starting. Let's see.